Welcome to Fyght Talk. My name is Christian Young. Welcome to Fyght Talk. My name is Christian Young, and welcome to episode 12, the final round. Today, we are going to be talking through QTNA, or questions that need answers. When we went through this season, we covered a lot of topics, and I thought it would be a good idea to really kind of dive into some of those topics a little bit more, especially knowing all of the questions that we received throughout the season. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, with episode 2, Welcome to Hollywood, we talked a bit about starting a business or when your business starts itself, and it brought a lot of questions in. One of the things that I really wanted to make sure we covered was, after you figured out the who, what, when, where, why, and how, what do you do? And it's a little bit simple, but a little bit complicated at the same time. So initially, when you're thinking about starting your business and you've determined your business structure, you definitely want to determine what state that you'd like your business to be formed in. Now, I'm going to put to the side the determination of whether or not you want to create an international business and you need to set up all kinds of limited partnerships and things like that. But once you've determined in the U.S. that you want to start a business and have determined the type of business, be it an LLC, a sole proprietorship, an S Corp, a C Corp, etc., you do want to access your state that you select, Secretary of State website, or the equivalent, so that you can register your business. Once you've registered your business, you also want to go ahead and visit the IRS, a place that you may not want to be, but is really necessary to go to get your employer identification number, or EIN. It's a really simple process, and it takes maybe about 5 minutes to go ahead and register that information. When you register that information, it enables you to start building a credit basis for your business and also start a bank account. In addition to that, one of the things that you will want to do is also check your local and state laws to make sure that you don't need any particular business licenses or permits. If you do need a business license or permit, your clerk of courts or an equivalent local government office will be the place that you would leverage to go ahead and do that. Once you've thought through your equivalent licenses or permits, what you'll also want to consider is determining whether or not you have achieved all the necessary things so that you can effectively start your business. Good resources for that are the U.S. Small Business Administration or vendors like myself. One of the things that you would want to do when you're thinking about engaging a vendor, though, is making sure that you clearly understand what it is that you're going to get out of the situation. Are they helping you with business formation? Are they helping you with business planning? What are the outputs? What are you actually going to get to help you really help to form your business? In addition to the general setup of your business, there are a lot of other things to consider. And really what you want to do is take some time to really reflect, as we talked about before, on who you are and how you'd like to work. Now, one of the things that I'm dealing with as a business owner is that need to constantly stay motivated, to make sure that you really want to continue to focus on your business and to stay in that space where you feel like you're actually achieving something. So knowing how I like to work and understanding my moods and my patterns of behavior was critically important in making sure that I engaged the right team to help me stay on track and also continued forward on my path. In addition, another thing that you're definitely going to want to consider is when you're thinking about how you're going to do it, making sure that you build in time for reality. Reality is going to be critically important when you're running your business, because if you are not in line with that, you can definitely end up taking on entirely too much and potentially overshooting or undershooting your goals. Awareness of your goals, awareness of who you are, awareness of how you operate under stress are all going to be critical things when you're really working to start your business. Another thing that you're going to want to consider is the viability of your business. Now, when you're considering your business, one of the things that we like to do at my company, because we definitely start a lot of businesses, is really understanding, will this business work? Now, it's okay if somebody else does your business or the similar type of business that you do, but it's really about differentiation and not discouragement. How you go to market is really a key factor in what you deliver to your clients. So if somebody is baking cakes, that doesn't mean that you can't bake cakes. You just may do it differently than what they do. And that's okay. So really taking the time to understand your market, understand who your competitors would be, understand what are the requirements to actually do business are going to be important before you even start, because you do need to make sure that your business is going to be viable, and you do need to understand how it could potentially work. Not to say that you're going to 100% knock it out of the park initially, but as you go through the process, learn about yourself, learn about your business, get those reps of consistency, your business will continue to optimize itself and get better and better. Now I want to talk a little bit about when your business starts itself. Now, we touched on that a little bit when we had the discussion with Nicole earlier this season. And I think it's really important to understand that sometimes the train does take off before you can get all the things in line. Sometimes you are building the car as you're driving it down the road, and that's okay. It's just important to keep in mind that you do need to build the appropriate processes and procedures around your business, even as it operates, to make sure that when you reach the end of the road, you actually have something that works. So making sure that you do key things like keeping your finances separated, making sure that you register your business or pay your appropriate taxes, making sure that you get all of your paperwork in line if you decided to take on employees is all going to be important, even when your business takes off before you're 100% ready. One of the things that was a bit of a shocker to me when I first started working in entrepreneurship was the plethora of misinformation that you get when you are kind of in phase of operating your business. You know, things can start themselves. You can take off down the road. Somebody will come in and say, for instance, like, you know, you film commercials. You can write off all of the clothes that you buy for your commercials. You will want to check that with a tax expert, because the way that things work in real life versus what people imagine it to be, especially when you're dealing with entrepreneurship, are miles apart. And you want to make sure that you're properly informed with professionals that know what they're doing. So don't be afraid to engage someone if you, in fact, are mid-business running, especially when an idea is really hot. There's a lot of things going on, and you don't necessarily have the time to do everything that you would normally do if you were just kind of starting a build and you didn't have the pressures of customers and delivery on your back. In episode 3, we discussed what's in a name, and there were a lot of questions around this, and I just want to take some time to address this. One of the questions that we received was whether or not you should be descriptive with your business name or creative. And I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. Like, if you want to name your business Johnny Cooks Seafood because Johnny Cooks Seafood, then you can definitely feel free. I think that there's a connection that you can create with your business that can really help on the local level. Now, if you want to be creative, feel free to be creative, but you need to also ground that in a bit of reality. Like, you don't want to have the world's longest business name because it's not going to make an impact with your customers or help them remember. You want to also consider, how that wording works. So you want to keep it simple. You want to make sure that you are utilizing things that can connect with your brand and with the market. If you are going to be more locally focused, you can probably expand and, say, I'm in Jonesboro, Illinois coffee company, because that's where you're selling your coffee. It's not to say that you can't expand into other markets. It's just that initially your business may resonate more on the local level than more broadly, on a national or international scale. All of these things are up to you as a business owner. There's nuances across the board that will be aligned with people's businesses. There's a social media site right now that has a really catchy name, and, it changed and it's resonating in a different way with people. But you definitely want to make sure, as you continue down the path of trying to determine your name, where it falls on the spectrum. You also want to make sure that your name doesn't offend anyone. So it's important to make sure that you check for disrespect. There's a lot of cultural inferences and other things that are out here in the market. And it's good to do a scan because you don't want to end up in a situation where you spend a lot of time trying to determine a name and it basically insults your customer base or someone else that could have influence upon your customer base. That's not what you're trying to do. In addition, you do want to check socials. You want to check for trademark infringement. You want to make sure that the domain name is available. Things like that can really be helpful to your business because as you work to align your business, having a consistent domain name, having a social media handles that are aligned across multiple platforms are all things that will benefit you. Now I want to delve a little bit more into trademarking. I'm going through trademarking myself right now, and it is an experience. It's not something that I'm qualified to do for myself, so I engaged an attorney to help us go through that process. And I will tell you, it is a process in which you have to maintain patience and also just know that it can take, up to a year or more to put a trademark into place legally. And that's just in the United States. So you definitely want to consider it, especially if you're looking at your business as a long-term thing for yourself, but also be aware that it may be something that's not achievable, and that's okay too. You can still use your business name. There are still ways in which you can have protections. You just may not have trademark protection. So becoming more familiar with the U.S. Trademarking Office and understanding at least the initial process where they, check to see if there's any conflicts and then, go about a public posting to make sure that your business is aligned across the nation. You also have to think about what categories you want to file your trademark in. And then there's also a cost element. So it's something in which you can take your time to do, but you just want to be aware of, as what you don't want to do is infringe upon someone else's trademark when you're starting your business. Moving on to episode 4, we talked about finding balance and grounding yourself. And I think the concept of balance is something that means different things to different people. And it's an area in which all of my guests really had their own perspective. Some people maintain their quote unquote balance by working out, spending time with their families, making sure that they give themselves grace. All of those things are really important. But I think that when you are really considering whether or not you have balance or fit or appropriate focus during the appropriate times, it's going to be important for you to have the emotional intelligence to actually listen to yourself and also listen to other people. One of the things that I've known for myself as an entrepreneur is that it has, on occasion, been very difficult to manage my business and also deal with the difficulties of day-to-day life. As an entrepreneur, there's a lot of decisions that sit on your shoulders. And on occasion, if you have employees, a lot of people who depend on you for their livelihood. And that can just be stressful. And I think that one of the things that I have done is just spend the time with myself to acknowledge that I cannot be Superman. And in planning my days and working through everything, I really have to be realistic on the fact that it may not make sense to try and achieve 9 things in one day because I think that I can do them instantly. Now, I talked a little bit about the to-do list and the fact that you can really stress yourself out by comparing your ability to get things done to your best day. And I was totally guilty of doing that at all times. Like, when I first started working just professionally in general, I would make a to-do list and it would be so long. It would be like, we're gonna, redesign somebody's corporate processes, do all of my expenses, which I never did, have 6 meetings with people to talk about their career development, make sure I followed up with my 4 clients to do X, Y, Z, and on and on and on. And that was just the work list. Then I would make a self list and I'd be like, also, when I get home, I'm going to clean the whole house, meal prep for a week, go work out at the gym, make sure that I call my parents, all those things. And a lot of times at the end of the day, I might check off 2 things. And then I would get down on myself. And as an entrepreneur, you can do the same thing and get down on yourself and be like, oh, I should be doing more. There are so many things that I need to be doing and I'm not doing enough. And it puts you in this cycle of really feeling like you're failing, but you're not. That is often, just you putting pressure on yourself, you shoulding yourself, you really just stressing yourself out because you think that on that single day in your life in 1847, when you were able to achieve 20 things on your to-do list, that you should be able to do that every day. And that was, a fluke. That was a phenomenon. That was all of the stars aligning. Like, you're not going to pick the winning lotto tickets every day. You're not going to achieve everything on your to-do list every day. So you really have to ground yourself in the reality of today, maybe I'm not feeling so hot. So I just want to keep the doors open. So let me just do the things that are necessary to keep the doors open today. Tomorrow, maybe I will feel differently. Maybe I won't, but I'll deal with that tomorrow. And that's okay too. Now, I know that can seem a little bit, foreign or different to people, especially as you kind of work through your business and maybe you're moving from a corporate situation into an entrepreneurial situation, or you're running parallel path, or you just have the stress of, I need to survive. And I get that, but you do need to survive. And that's where you really have to, double down and focus on the bigger picture rather than descending down into the chaos of your mind and dragging yourself through the mud for not being all you can be every 5 seconds. Now, in addition to that, I think it's important to be able to, listen to folks. Like, sometimes people tell you without telling you that you're burning, that, you may want to take a break or take a step back. And I don't think that you should feel insulted or ignore them or think, I am the foremost authority on myself, so you can't tell me. That doesn't work. Like, on occasion, people have the ability to see you better than you see yourself because they have an outside perspective. They may not necessarily have skin in the game the way that you do. So I think it's important to make sure that you learn how to listen, because sometimes there are things outside of yourself that give you cues to know that it may be a moment where you need to be still. When you're really looking to kind of find balance, find fit, make sure that the things that you are doing are working for you, you may have to consider slowing down in order to speed up. Moving on to episode 5, we talked about we are family, but this is a business. And we sat down with Lisa and talked to her about working with family. And I think that one of the things that I want to talk about is just teaming in general. Now, when you're working with a team, there's a bit of a balance because, people will be like, it's your business family. You spend more time with those people sometimes than you do your actual family, so on and so forth. But I think when you really consider teaming, there's a couple of different ways in which you can go at it. For myself, I spend a lot of time with my team, and I also really want my team to win. Whether or not they stay with me, I don't care. Like, it's really important to me personally to make sure that the people on my team can achieve their dreams and that they're able to stay motivated and balance, whatever that means, in their day-to-day life, so that when they come and work with me, they are at the best level that they can be. And I learned that just based on my experiences in corporate America. Now, with all of that being said, I also have to put on my manager hat and say, you still need to get your work done. Like, I understand that life is lifing, but money needs to be made. And in order for that to happen, we do need to maintain some professionalism. So there's a bit of a balance there that I think that is important to make sure that whether or not your team is family or you treat them like family, that you are aware of. And Lisa talked a bit about that. She still got to go to Thanksgiving with these people, even though she fired somebody yesterday. Or, making sure that although, you may not necessarily have the kind of conversations at work that you would have at home, especially like if you're working with one of your kids or if you're working with a parent or something like that, that you maintain that divide between personal and professional. And I think that it's something that as you work to kind of choose your management style, you really consider. Now, my management style is open. I like to have feedback from my teams. If I'm getting on their nerves, I want you to tell me. And I'll be like, I will do better. I mean, of course, after I complain about it for like 5 minutes, but that's just my style. And they've known me for a long time, so it works. But, as I work to onboard new people, we have those open and honest conversations. And we really discuss like, no, if something's not working for you, it's important for me to make sure that you let me know so that we can shift and flex. Because if we're going to be a higher performing team, then me as a leader needs to be able to flex to your style because you may need different things in order to be the best employee that you can be. And my emotional awareness or intelligence, whatever you want to call it, EQ, there's a whole like shelf of books around that, is dependent on my ability to be able to read my team and understand where they're at so that way I can meet them there and we can still achieve our goals. So I think that overarchingly, when you look at team, when you look at working with family, when you look at working with close friends, when you look at working with coworkers who have become close friends, it's really just about making sure that you're effectively communicating on a level where there can be mutual respect, appropriate boundaries, but also an ability to execute. Business operations, how's it going down? In that episode, we talked to all of our entrepreneurs around, around understanding how they work through business operations. And business operations are more than just your operating agreement. Now, I think I shared at one point that operating agreements can be the biggest challenge of your life. Like if it's more than just yourself working in a business, it can result in World War VII. It can result in a lot of debates. There can be some hurt feelings. There can be, a lot of, this will never happen. I don't even know why we're discussing this. But like I said, you never know what will happen. We didn't know that there was going to be a global pandemic and that happened. So we have to plan for what may be inevitable and what may be unexpected wherever we can. So having an operating agreement really helps to develop a foundation by which we run our business. And it's also helpful when you're trying to open your bank accounts or you're trying to open investment accounts or working with, grants, loans, different organizations that want to understand how you move. Operating agreements really are a key tool to every business. And if you do not have one, it's important to start thinking about one. In addition to your operating agreements, you just have to know how you're going to work. What are your business hours? Are you going to have business hours? Are you going to have contractors? What do contractors mean? Right now, I'm learning about onboarding a contractor internationally. What does that take? What kind of laws do I have to consider when I'm working with someone who lives in an entirely different country and I don't want to be on the hook for fines and penalties and all kinds of things like that? All of those things are things that you have to learn about and will continually happen as you work to optimize your business. You don't have to have it all figured out today, but you do have to have an initial framework by which you're going to work. If you're going to be selling cakes for a living, you will want to understand, where am I going to get my ingredients? Because if you don't have those, then the business doesn't work. And just having that consistency so you're not always going to have to figure it out on the spot is really critical when you're thinking about how it's going to go down. The last thing that I think you should consider, especially when thinking about business operations and how things are going to work, is the fact that this is a continuous cycle of learning. You will constantly learn, you will constantly adapt, you will have processes in which you will need to change and figure out new ways. So do not get stuck in your ways and say, we only, we'll go back to the cake example. We only buy our flour from the grocery store on 2nd Street and it has to be in aisle 5. What if they move everything over to aisle 7? What if the grocery store closes and they open up a new one on 3rd Street? You may have to learn how to do some things differently as you run your business and consistently looking at your processes and procedures and seeing whether or not things have to change, especially as you've given it time to kind of work for a bit, is a part of business. Continually iterating until you can get to comfortable business as usual with the awareness of the fact that business as usual usually changes. So you'll have to potentially come up with another game plan is critical to understanding your business operations. Episode 7, But I Don't Know Y'all, was about vendors. And this episode really was focused on talking with Sharifa about the process of selecting vendors. But we did get a lot of questions around actually engaging with your vendors and potentially disengaging with your vendors. Like, for instance, what happens if you get a change order? How do you protect against inappropriate change orders? Now, change orders being, I asked you to provide 2 apples and an orange, and because you said that was what I needed, and now you're saying I need a watermelon, a grapefruit, a honeydew melon, 6 potatoes and a grape. And you're like, wait a minute, what? Like, this isn't what we signed up for. Like, how do you align with that? And I think that this is where planning is going to be critically important prior to engaging a vendor. Now, with vendors, there's always going to be that initial conversation. This is what I'm trying to do. This is what I'll need. This is how it should work. And it's a dialogue, so you will go back and forth in that discussion. Your contract is a critical piece of that dialogue. You need to have very clear guidance on how you'll manage through change orders. And there also should be some clear guidance in your contracts around the timing of change orders, how much advance notice you need, and what the approval process is. What you don't want to have happen is you get to the end of a project and your vendor brings you a bill that has an additional 50 to 75% of charges on there that you weren't aware of. So making sure that you have clear rules and guidance around how we'll handle those things, clear rules and guidance around the amount of notice. Like, if there needs to be a change, do you need to know immediately? Do you need to know 30 days before the change is implemented? How is that going to work? Then also, you as a business owner really need to have some understanding of what you'll do if your vendor, for lack of a better term, fails you. They don't deliver what you need to be delivered. They miss deadlines. They cause a ripple effect in your ability to deliver your products or services. How will you address that? What is your plan, if your vendor needs to depart immediately? Like, we have beef. And in this beef, I've decided I'm not working with you. Like, this is over immediately. Like, what are you going to do? Do you immediately stop operations, or do you have a backup plan in place? Thinking through vendor succession is critical. And then also making sure that you have plans for when your vendor could potentially fail you is also going to be critical. I'm not saying that you want to walk into any relationship thinking about the end, but when you're dealing with vendors, you do have to think that way. Another area where we received a question is around what happens when you have multiple owners or multiple stakeholders in the vendor decision. I think that when you're dealing with a business where you have more than one owner or different level of partners or things like that, this is where your operating agreement comes into play. How are we going to decide about vendors? What is the vote count that needs to happen? If there are 2 of you, is there a criteria list that we need to align so it makes the decision a little bit easier? Can we, not engage someone based on vibes? Things like that. You do need to make those decisions prior to even engaging with the vendor to determine if you're going to hire them. Because if you don't, you can end up in situations where you have someone that is trying to sell you their service, sitting and waiting for you to finish figuring out how we're going to make those decisions. So having an operating agreement or a business charter that helps you really determine those kind of decision points is going to be key. And on occasion, you may just determine, okay, for financial vendors, this person is going to be responsible. They'll run point, so they'll do initial vetting, and then there's a vote. All of those things should be considered, especially as you're building your business, particularly when you're dealing with partners. Another question that we received is, how do you manage vendors that are not in the same country that you're in? When I spoke with NECA, she talked a bit around the fact that she had international vendors and they worked a little bit differently. There wasn't necessarily a PO process in place or, a guaranteed phone number that she could call in order to get things done. And it could potentially impact her overall supply chain because some of her vendors were coming from places where the business processes may not necessarily have been as defined as she wanted them to be. And so I think that when you're working with international vendors, you really have to be conscious of a few things. Number one is timelines. Now, if you're working with a business where timelines are critically important and there is inventory involved, you may have to consider carrying more inventory or safety stock as a result of that. You may not be able to do made-to-order situations, especially when you have timing requirements that you're trying to meet with your customers. If it's a service-oriented business, you really need to make sure that you are aligned with key things like holidays. I worked in a global corporation, and every single day, some country in this world has a national holiday. So somebody's going to be off work. And a lot of times for me, it always seemed to happen where there would be like an international festival or something in a country and no one worked that entire day. And I would be like, dang, I really needed to get this thing. Or, the work habits of the country that you're working with are different than ours. For instance, I used to work a lot with people from Europe. August in Europe is not the time to schedule massive meetings. It's not the time. Chinese New Year is not the time to have a critical deliverable due from someone who's sitting in Beijing. Diwali is not the time to contact someone who lives in Mumbai and be like, hey, I need to get that, because they're going to be like, hey, I don't work here. Golden Week in Japan, same thing. All of these places, great to work with, but you need to be aware of what's going on over there as much as they need to be aware of what's going on over here, so that the exchange of ideas and information can continue to flow with consideration for life. In episode 8, Do They See Me?, we talked a bit about marketing. And there was a moment where we had a very interesting conversation around the impact of social media and potentially the overdependence on social media versus an email or direct to customer contacts. And I think that we are seeing examples of that in real life right now, as one of the major platforms in the US will potentially be decommissioned. And for people whose livelihood is based primarily on that single platform, there are some changes that they have to consider. So I think that when you're really thinking about your marketing strategy, it's important to think through what it means for your business. What happens if the internet breaks tomorrow? Are you still going to be able to remain in contact with your clients? Do you have the proper information that's necessary to continue that path, even if you cannot reach them through a social media platform? In addition to making sure that you're looking at your dependence on social media, I'm just going to say this flat out. Do not get trapped in the algorithm. When we first started doing marketing for Fyght Talk, I cannot tell you how many social media ads I have received about the algorithm. Post at 3 o'clock. Don't post at 2 o'clock. You're not doing this right. Use the word cherries in your hashtag and it'll work. There are so many, I don't even know how to say it, old wives' tales about how it will work for you, that it's unreal. And everybody's selling a class on it. Everybody has a manual about it. There are so many things. And the algorithm keeps changing and evolving, and we just don't know. There's not a one-size-fits-all formula for how you are better able to manage and market your business on the internet. So I think that you really have to take into consideration that there is some validity around just being consistent. I have followed a lot of different companies over the years, and consistency of brand, consistency of quality, and consistency of communication have been 3 areas that I have noted for most of the leading brands. And you know what you're going to get, you know how they're going to come at you, and you know how they're going to treat you. If you can continue to build, your brand on, this is what you get from me, this is what I do, this is how I'm going to do it for you, and what you should expect from me on the level of quality, and these are the avenues by which I will come at you. I think that that's key. One of the things that burns me up like every other day, because I deal with it all the time and I think it's slightly hilarious but also very maddening, is, the marketing ploy by which I feel like I want to trick you out of your information in order to kind of move forward. And I understand that that's a tool or a method, but I think being genuine with your customers is going to get you way further than, tricking them out of their email so that you can spam them and sell their information, or, delivering half of the service so like they, can't get to the next level without, going through an obstacle course. All of those things are methods, but at the end of the day, you're still going to have to deliver. And your ability to make sure that they keep coming back is contingent on making sure that you deliver with quality and respect, and also something with some level of consistency that they can count on. I can go on and on about marketing, and, we can get into making sure that you have the proper colors for the certain day, because psychologically, people react to certain things. And I think that those things are important. But overall, it's about the messaging of your marketing and making sure that however you're planning to deliver is something that you can be proud of even when you're not in business. In episode 9, seeds in fact do grow. I think that this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because, as I talked about in the beginning of the episode, that feeling that you're kind of just running on a hamster wheel, or, you're constantly working, but nothing's happening, is a consistent thing in entrepreneurship. Actually, it's a consistent thing in life. Like, there's going to be those periods in your life where it feels like you're just in famine, that there's nothing going on, that you're trying everything that you can, but nothing's working and things like that. And I think that, of course, initially I'll be like, patience is critical and having faith is critical and all those things. But let's be clear about a couple of things. Patience is critical, but you need to be doing the things that you're supposed to do in order to build towards your goal rather than sitting and waiting for it to happen. So it's like, it can't be like, I'm going to be a millionaire one day, so I patiently selected my lottery ticket numbers. Like, that's not how it works. You need to be working a plan. You need to have something going on. It's just not sitting around and waiting. It's like my grandmother used to always be like, you really think that like your husband's about to just knock on the door while you're on the couch? The only people knocking on your door while you're on the couch is delivery people. And I don't necessarily know what that looks like for a dating pool. So I think that, that whole concept of patience is really having patience while making sure that you're doing the work that's necessary. And having faith is critically important, but you can't have blind faith. Like, if you're starting a company that's around fashion design and all of your fabric is sourced from Hefty, like, that's not necessarily going to work. So you just can't say, well, I have an idea and I'm going to work this idea and it's going to work. Well, you really need to think about the feasibility of your idea. Like, I am currently not planning to be an NBA basketball player. I cannot have faith that that's just going to happen because I'm not doing the work that's necessary to get there, besides the fact that I would need to be in the WNBA anyway. But it's just, I think when you're thinking about the fact that, yes, seeds do in fact grow, but you have to seed. Like, you have to plant something in order for it to grow. and making sure that you're doing the things that are necessary so that eventually when it happens, you're ready is an entirely different discussion. And I think that, in addition to really making sure that you are patient with the work that you're doing and you have faith that the work that you're doing will eventually create something, you also really need to understand that there are going to be instances where you'll pivot. And making sure that you are comfortable with knowing that business changes. What you may have thought was the wave may not be the wave, so you might have to adjust slightly is critical. And I keep saying critical, but it's critical. Like I don't have another word for it. I didn't look one up. But it's really important to make sure that you are continuing to go down the path of understanding that, yes, I want to open a restaurant that serves chicken. Now, when I first started, maybe it was baked chicken. Next week, it might be, I might need to fry it up. I might need to sous vide it. I might need to saute it. There could be different options. It may not necessarily look the way that you wanted it to look, but overarchingly, you're still achieving your plan. You still have a chicken restaurant. It's just a different kind of chicken than what you thought it was going to be. When we talked earlier this season with Lisa, she started off with bars. She's selling granola now. She's not selling bars. So I think that her plan was still working. It's just working differently. When NECA started her business, Love Dot, she was looking at made-to-order fashion. And now she's selling through collections. And that is working better than what she thought it would. So I think it's about being able to embrace the pivot and understanding that sometimes in that pivot, the work that you've done has not gone to waste. It's helped you be ready for this pivot. So as you start to pivot and accelerate, you are ready for all that comes with it. Episode 10 was around getting to the bag and keeping it. In this episode, I talked to Brenda from Sync to Clarity around finance, accounting, taxes, so on and so forth. And we had a really good conversation in that space. I got a lot of questions around some very specific topics. So I'm going to read some of them out and we're going to talk through them. The first was to hire or not, especially when thinking about a bookkeeper. Now, if you have time, let's be clear. Number one, if you have the time, and then you have the expertise yourself, you can potentially not use a bookkeeper or accountant. Now, I'm going to say expertise, and that means you actually really know what you're doing. Not, I watched this on YouTube or saw a 30-minute help video. It's really important when you're dealing with your finances to make sure that you have the expertise, but keeping in mind that you also need to have the time. As entrepreneurs, as I discussed before, we have a tendency to underestimate the amount of time in which it takes to do things. And so I think that really when you're thinking about to hire a bookkeeper or not, it's really going to be contingent on those two items in addition to some other ones, but those would be the top two on my list: time and expertise. Another question that we received was, do I operate on a cash or an accrual basis? I am not an accountant, so I'm gonna put that first. I am not an accountant. That's my standard disclaimer. But based on my understanding, I would say that typically you'll see smaller businesses work on a cash basis. Companies that work on accrual basis, which means that you will accrue, like for instance, I spent $10 or I'm going to receive $10 from Joe. That means that I'm going to account for that on my books before I even get the money. A lot of times you'll see companies do that when they're carrying inventory. And it's a great way in which to understand, like, this is what my money looks like for real, not necessarily what's in my accounts, but what's coming, so on and so forth. But it is a little bit more detailed. And that is something where you definitely want to have somebody who has expertise with you throughout that process, because it can be a lot more complex and also something in which I would see more larger companies doing rather than a smaller business. Another question I got was, what software? Now, initially I could say check with your bookkeeper because they'll have recommendations, and sometimes they'll actually have access to software in which you can bring your information into. And even if you decide to break up with them, you can take it without having a significant issue. And there's also opportunities for discounts. Now, I've heard of QuickBooks and Xero and Wave and FreshBooks and a plethora of other softwares. I think you really have to spend time, if you have the expertise, to kind of go through all the benefits. And if you don't have the expertise, check with your vendors who work with those tools the most to know what will work best for you. One of the things that I will say, though, because you guys may not know this about me, and sometimes, like, when vendors make me mad, like, I will never work with them again in my whole entire existence, even if they're the last vendor on the face of the earth, because I'm kind of stubborn. But one of the things that I noted is really important about your software is the customer service backing on there. For me personally, if I can't talk to someone about what's happening with my product or service, then I don't want to deal with it, because the most frustrating thing, in my opinion, that can ever happen is when something goes wrong with something that you're purchasing and all you can do is send an email. And then they close the ticket as soon as they answer your email and you never talk to the same person again. It burns me up a little bit on the inside. So I would say that when you're deciding what kind of software or tool that you're going to use, make sure that you include in that research how they provide customer service so that you can make sure that that will work for you. Another question that I received was around taxes. Now, I talked a little bit earlier around taxes and the fact that people will tell you you can write off your, anything in the world against your business. Make sure that you're talking to a proper tax vendor, potentially even a tax attorney, to make sure that you don't bring the IRS to your door because you heard somebody say that you could write off all of your groceries because you ate at work. Make sure that you have someone who's advising you on the appropriate level, because when the IRS gets involved, it's not necessarily the most simplistic thing that you will ever go through. So I would say definitely when you're considering your tax situation, don't just believe what anyone tells you on the internet, including myself. So make sure that you check on that. And then business credit cards or not. And that is how the question came in, or not. I would say that business credit cards help you keep your books and records separate. They also help you build credit for your business. But what I will say is make sure that you're looking at the terms and conditions of those credit cards, the potential benefits of those credit cards, and then any potential fees or things like that that could come along with it, especially if it's a secured card or it has a big annual fee, so on and so forth, because that needs to be figured out within your budget. Also, make sure that you're understanding whether or not you're going to be carrying debt on your books or if you're going to be paying it off every month. Those are things that can really impact your bottom line, and you do want to make sure that you have all of that appropriately figured out. The last question was, when do I do a financial review? There's a lot of different things that you can review in your financials, but I think at the minimum, you do want to make sure that you know what's going in and out of your account, whether or not you're doing a significant reconciliation on a weekly basis. So if you have, bills that are being paid, money that's going in and out of your account, you do want to at least check and make sure it's there. You may not do like a big financial reconciliation every week, but you do want to just check to make sure that the money is where it's supposed to be. One of the biggest shocks, and I don't even know why this was a shock. One of the biggest shocks for me was when I started doing payroll, that I needed to pay taxes like every month. Like that tax bill comes out every month and my heart hurts a little bit. But, my bookkeeper who helps handle my tax payments make sure that they let me know like this money is coming out so that when I open my business bank accounts that I don't have a heart attack knowing that a large chunk of money has just gone out. So, things like that, being aware of when things are going to come out of your accounts, when things are going to go into your accounts, doing a monthly reconciliation process or quarterly, depending on how many transactions you have, making sure that you're looking at your financial statements, balance sheet, P&L or profit and loss statement, your cash flow statement. All of those things can happen weekly for just general review, monthly for reconciliation review, at least quarterly for your financial statements and movements. Things like that will really help you as you move forward on your financial journey with your business. And now we're at the last episode, episode 11, which was grand opening, grand closing. And I thought about that episode a lot after we filmed it. And one of the things that I really reflected on was the fact that that whole conversation is around making sure that you understand the impact of change and how it can show up in your life. And really like understanding, that whole concept of it's not if, it's when. One of the things that Brianna talked about is that the idea can be good, everything can be working, but it may not be right now. And I think that I've talked a bit about change all through this episode, but it really brought home to me the fact that as entrepreneurs, we are all kind of tasked with the responsibility to become a bit of a change agent. So how we operate through change, how we make sure that, our people flourish, our communities flourish, our businesses flourish, even in the face of the fact that, life comes at you at 1,000 miles an hour. There's always something new to consider. There's, always all of these forces that are working with you or against you as an entrepreneur. And you really need to be able to kind of handle that with some level of grace and also some level of protection for yourself so that, you can come out of the other side. Now, of course, we can delve into, you start a business with the end in mind, and that's all true. But I think it's your ability as an entrepreneur to deal with change that really helps you determine whether or not you can remain an entrepreneur. And not to say that, if you end up closing your business and it goes badly for you and, you're upset and you decide that I want to go and be corporate or small or, work for some other small business or something like that you can never be an entrepreneur again. But I think it's about how you rebound, how you reflect, how you grow through that change that really determines whether or not this is the life for you. And that is something that is very important to me, especially as I reflect upon all of the conversations and all of the great engagement that we had throughout this season, because, it's always going to be about when. There's no other thing to consider, especially when you're talking through, business or life in general or changes that you're going to make for yourself. And, with that, I think that for us, that it's that excitement and that willingness to embrace change that makes entrepreneurship such a feasible option. If you are not comfortable with doing the same thing every day, if you are not comfortable with, just maintaining the status quo, that's when, jobs that are a little bit more dynamic rather than static work for you. Not to say that you may want to be the person that all the responsibility falls on, but you may want to work in that environment. You may want to be in an environment where it's like, hey, Ed said that we should, and I should stop with the guy names. Ed said that we should, do X, Y, Z. And, you're like, what? That's a good idea. Let's start a business there, or let's do this. It's about that ability to like embrace it and say, okay, we're going to go into this different direction potentially, or we're going to make a slight pivot and move to the left rather than moving to the right. And, that's exciting, and it's not demoralizing, and it's not, something that makes me want to just go sit in a corner and turn the lights off. And so I think that, when you're thinking about all of this in the context of, a grand closing, it helps you because it's like, what did I learn from here? What did I take away? Every interaction that you have in business, in relationships, so on and so forth, does something for you. And so it's always good, I think, even in those situations where it may not be the most positive, for you to kind of reflect and say, how did this serve me? And it did serve you in some way, shape, or form, whether or not it was a positive serving or a negative serving. And I think that that's where, really looking at those instances are critical and will benefit you in the long run. With all of that, we talked about a lot this season, and I just want to take a moment and say thank you all for your engagement, your listens, your follows, your likes, seeing us and visiting us on different platforms, the calls I received, the feedback that I received, whether or not I wanted to listen to it or not. And, just thank you. And thank you for being with us this season. And we look forward to seeing you in season 2.